I'm joined by Dr. Kate Coleman, who formed Keep Prison Single Sex, which of course is self-explanatory. But Kate, tell us about it. Why did you form it?
Hi, Sonia. It's so nice to be here.
So lovely to see you.
So I formed this organisation, this campaign, Keep Prison Single Sex, just over a year ago when I was recovering from long COVID. And it was pretty much me, a couple of boxes of stickers, and a not very good Twitter account. And I was motivated to do that because of the evidence, and this may shock your viewers, that the female prison estate in this country is not single sex, it is mixed sex, because certain male prisoners under certain sets of circumstances are able to apply to be transferred to the female prison estate, or even just allocated there right from the start of their sentence. And as I know we've spoken about before, but in case your viewers aren't aware, women in prison are some of the most vulnerable women and the vulnerable people in this country, with high rates of mental health problems, previous experience of domestic violence, sexual violence, very often at the hands of their male partners, traumatic brain injury, which I find very, very disturbing. In one recent study in Scotland, it was as high as 80% of women had a significant brain injury. So yeah, it was motivated by that, you know, you've got this literally, obviously, captive population of very vulnerable women, and they're having sometimes some of the most violent and sexually violent male prisoners housed with them, and they have no choice about that. And I just felt this has to stop. So,
and you're right. And when I've tweeted about it before or talked about it before, I've had people come back and say, this is just theoretical, it's not really happening. And even if it's happening, it's not really an issue. But none of those things are correct, right?
I mean, I really wish it was theoretical. We know that males have been housed in the female prison estate at least since the 1980s. The criteria have changed over the decades. And where we are at the moment, we believe that there's probably around 20 housed in the female prison estate, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's enough for between 2 or 3 in each female prison.
And we do know that a percentage of men who are identifying as trans and in prison are actual sex attackers, right?
Well, I mean, this is a very disturbing statistic. And I know we're going to talk about a legal case in a minute, but this was a statistic which was referred to in the judgment for that case. As at 2019, which because of COVID, those are the most recent data statistics that we have from the Ministry of Justice, there were 129 prisoners of the male sex who identify as transgender held in the male prison estate. Of those, 57% had at least one conviction for a sexual offence. Now, when you compare that to about 2 to 3% of female offenders, female prisoners, but also when you compare that to the male prison population, where it's only 18%. So we're talking about a population which has a rate of sexual offending which is far in excess even of male prisoners.
That's extraordinary.
Now, it is extraordinary.
That's outrageous. So you did mention the judgment. So that judgment was last week. Tell us about it.
Yes. So it was a judicial review which was brought by a female prisoner who, for reasons of anonymity, went by the initials FDJ. She claimed that she'd been sexually assaulted by a male prisoner who identified as transgender and who had what's called a gender recognition certificate, which means that he's gone through a particular legal process under the Gender Recognition Act to obtain legal recognition that he is female, right, which also means that he's had the sex marker on his birth certificate changed from M to F. Right. She claimed that she was sexually assaulted by this prisoner. who had been imprisoned and convicted for very serious sexual offences against women and was held in the female prison with her, the general population. So she brought a judicial review and she challenged the lawfulness of the two Ministry of Justice policies which concern the allocation of transgender prisoners within the prison estate, claiming that they were unlawful on the grounds that firstly they misstate the law and secondly that they unlawfully discriminate against women. So that came to court at the beginning of March and that was held over 2 days. And at the end of last week, on Friday, 2nd of July, we finally had the judgment. And to my disappointment, my immense disappointment, the judges ruled in favour of the Secretary of State for Justice that the policies are capable of operating lawfully. So they found against the claimant. And although that is disappointing, I think, you know, we do need to put that into context. You know, this was a big ask. I don't think any of us were expecting a complete win. I think some of us, myself included, we were hoping for something a bit more in the middle.
Right.
But we need to see it in the context of the other things that the judgment said and the previous legal action which has been brought around this area.
Right. So it's not all negative. What positive can we take from that judgment?
Well, I think a key thing which came out from the judgment, and this was one of the first things that they said in the discussion part, was that the court had been called upon to decide as to the lawfulness of the policies, not their desirability.
Right, that's really significant.
And they went on to say, and I'll just read out a quote, "I fully understand the concerns advanced on behalf of the claimant, on behalf of the female prisoner. Many people may think it incongruous and inappropriate that a prisoner of masculine physique and with male genitalia should be accommodated in a female prison in any circumstances." Right. They also made it clear that they were judging as to the possibility of lawful operation of the policies, not whether in any particular set of circumstances, in any individual case, the policies had operated lawfully. Right. So, and I think this is quite key, is that the assumption that they have to work on is that all the risk assessment practices and procedures specified in the policy are adequate. Right. I would argue that they're not, for quite good reasons, which I'll come on to no doubt in a minute. But I think another key aspect is that for the first time, the fears and anxieties of women in prison were acknowledged as being real, as being justifiable, and as existing even in the case of a nice male prisoner, you know, one who hasn't been convicted of serious sexual or violent offences against women or children, those fears are real. However, nevertheless, they weren't seen as being significant enough, weighty enough, important enough to swing the balance against the desires of some male prisoners to be housed with women. And I mean, we referred to these 129 just now. I mean, and this was a figure which was mentioned in the judgment. And if the MOJ can get it right in the male estate for 129 of these male prisoners, if the MOJ can meet their legitimate needs for safety, for security, their ability to express themselves in their chosen gender identity, if it can get it right for all these 129, why can't it get it right for everybody?
Right.
Why does any male prisoner need to be housed with women? I argue they don't.
No, of course not. And the message there, of course, is that the feelings of men who wish to identify as women take precedent over actual women.
Yes, absolutely. The judges also acknowledged that introducing one of these male prisoners into the female estate does increase the risk of sexual assault to a level which would not be the case if that prisoner had been female.
Wow.
So there's a lot of acknowledgement
Wow.
about, all the things that we've been saying, which other people, other organizations have gone, no, that doesn't exist. That's not important. That's never the case. You're making it up. All of these things were actually acknowledged in the judgment. And I think that is very important going forwards.
And how can that help going forwards?
Well, in my view, if this is lawful, it's not desirable.
No.
I don't think that any right-thinking person would believe that it should be lawful for a convicted male rapist to be housed alongside female offenders who've been the victims of sexual assault, often since childhood. I don't think any right-thinking person can believe that, no matter your views on criminal justice, on incarceration, on the prison system, on rehabilitation, on any of that. I don't think that any right-thinking person can think that that's correct. So I believe that that's the way forward, is to take it to Parliament. We've got a growing group of MPs and peers across all political parties who are supportive and who are active. This past week, we've emailed out 30 questions to our supportive peers and MPs to be asked across both houses. And we will just keep on challenging this and keep on pushing on it.
I noticed.
Make people angry.
Yeah, we have to be angry. We need to be furious, actually.
Yeah.
I noticed the news story today. I'm just trying to find it. And it was about a cop, actually, who, and this brings me to another.
Zoe Watts.
Got it. Okay, Zoe Watts. Now, this brings me to something else that you've been heavily involved in, and that is, these are not our crimes. Yeah.
A woman is an adult human female. A man is an adult human male. These are scientific, biological facts that cannot change. However, there are men who think that they are women or that they can become women. They are wrong. You cannot change sex. But once they have decided that they are women, these men demand that everyone agrees with them, agrees that they are women. This film presents 71 male criminals, men, from the United Kingdom who insist that they are women. They are not women. These crimes were not committed by women, but they are reported in the media as crimes committed by women. The pronouns she and her are used to refer to these men. In court, they are also referred to as she and her. Female names are used for them, but these are lies. These are men, not women.
Absolutely. I think, that these are sort of the two main prongs of keep prison single sex.
Yes.
Firstly is keep prison single sex, and secondly is accurate data collection. And just one more, just looping very quickly back to prisons.
Go.
I referred to male prisoners who identify as transgender, who've got a gender recognition certificate and have had their birth certificate changed from male to female to reflect that. In the MOJ statistics, these have already always been recorded as female and women, so they've been hidden within the statistics. This is now changing from this year as a result of the judicial review, which we're very, very pleased about. But I don't know yet, we're going to have to ask more questions about this, whether this will filter down to incident reporting.
Right.
Because the incident with the female prisoner who was sexually assaulted by the male prisoner with the GRC, that would have been recorded as an assault committed by a woman.
Yeah. There's Zoe Watts, I was reading the report about it earlier, and it was all she. So this, of course, completely distorts our statistics.
It distorts public thinking. I mean, there's several levels to this. There's what happens at the level of official data collection, and we know from Freedom of Information requests that Fair Play did a few years back, that they had answers back showing that 16 police forces were recording gender identity, not sex, including for people who were charged with sexual assault and rape. We're now repeating all of these FOIAs, all of these freedom of information requests to update that info. Then there's the level of what happens at the courts, where we know that preferred pronouns and preferred names are used, including, you know, witness statements. And then there's the level of press reporting, which usually reflects what happens in court. And yes, you know, she, her. And we know that it's not. We know that this, you know, this is not the case. And, you know, we get photographs in the press. I mean, if we're lucky, we'll get a photograph. You can match it up, but you'll get a photograph of somebody.
Well, I tell you why I thought was really interesting is the fact that you've obviously been dealing with the whole issue about keeping prisons single sex. And what we have is a soap opera on TV, Hollyoaks, who have suddenly done a storyline about a trans-identified male in prison, and they've completely reversed what is really happening. And what they've presented is that women, adult human females, are beating up this trans-identified male. What do you think about that?
Well, I haven't yet sat down to watch it in all its glorious detail. That is going to be for tomorrow with a glass of wine.
Right.
But
and
I've
a sedative.
Well, I've watched the 3.5 minute clip.
Right.
And it's a complete reversal.
Yes.
It's a complete reversal. You know, this is the most opposite way of presenting the situation of what happens when a male prisoner is housed with women.
Right.
This is the complete, and this, you know, I just also like to say, you know, every prisoner has the right to be safe in prison.
Sure.
All male prisoners have the right to be safe in prison. And there are many vulnerable categories of males in prison, but that's the job for the male estate.
It is.
You know, I've seen a couple of tweets. The actor who plays Sally preemptively blocked me.
Me too.
Twitter, which I think there must be another block list going around.
Yes.
But somebody had screenshotted a tweet from the actor from a few weeks ago, which said something like, I think it was gender critical bigots, no, gender critical GC transphobes, you know, attack Sally in prison or something like that.
Wow.
So already
such propaganda.
Just, you know, and what one of the lines from one of the I think it's, I presume, a prison officer or a member of prison staff, when Sally is recuperating in bed, calls the female offenders bigots.
Right.
It is such a, you know, I mean, I wouldn't expect Hollyoak to have the resources to tackle a storyline like this appropriately.
Right.
But they've managed to do the worst possible job.
They have indeed. They have indeed, which is unlike you, because you are out there trying to do the best possible thing for these women, as you say, who are some of the most vulnerable females that we have in our society. So tell me, Kate, moving forward, keep prisons single sex. What are your plans and how can we support you?
Well, we're doing a big push into Parliament. What people can do is write to their MP and tell your MP what it is that you think of this situation and what needs to happen, that it needs to stop, and that women in prison shouldn't have an extra punishment levied upon them. Because this is also what's happening. This is an unofficial punishment that is being levied on women in prison, and it's unacceptable. And it frustrates rehabilitation as well.
And you also have a crowdfunder.
We also have a crowdfunder. As I said at the beginning, you know, we started with me and a not particularly good Twitter account and a few boxes of stickers. We've grown, we've got our MP group. We're also doing work in Scotland. We've been consulted on policy. We want to produce materials. We want to really push this as hard as we can. Now we have this opportunity. And I think, unfortunately, that all takes money. It would be great if it took magic wands, but it doesn't. It takes money. So if anybody can spare anything, that would be extremely welcome. And I promise to do my best.